Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Tempest in the Tea Leaves by Kari Townsend, narrated by Tiffany Morgan. Chapter 1. Sylvia Eleanor Meadows, get back in this penthouse immediately. My father, Donald Meadows, the almighty doctor and king of his domain, thundered as though I were still 9. He stood on the busy street in Manhattan and stabbed a finger toward the enormous building behind him, his gray-streaked, perfectly coiffed brown hair not moving an inch. "It's sunny now, Dad, and has been for almost a decade." I pulled my long sweater coat closed over my Save the Planet t-shirt in a useless attempt to hide the hole in the thigh of my jeans. My parents' perusal of my person and the disapproval reflected in their eyes revealed they'd seen it all. I suddenly felt the same sense of failure and inadequacy I always felt whenever I was around them. Just one of the many reasons I was leaving the city. "You'll always be Sylvia to me." He squared his shoulders in his precisely tailored Armani suit, and I knew he'd never budge on that one. As my parents' only child, they'd both been hurt when I'd changed my name, but I couldn't help it. I hated the name Sylvia, and I was nothing like them. I sometimes wondered if I was adopted. "I'm not going inside, Dad." I threw my single tattered plaid suitcase that had once been my grandmother's into my brand new car, a used, slightly rusted but well-loved white VW Bug. The orange, yellow, and pink flowers on the sides suited me perfectly. "I've told you dozens of times already that I'm moving. You need to accept it." I added a large box filled with my fortune-telling supplies right next to the single suitcase in the back seat. "Don't be silly, darling. You can't go anywhere in that thing. Why, I don't think it would even make it across town, especially in this weather." My mother, Vivian Meadows, the ruthless lawyer and queen of high society, took me by the arm. She dusted the light snowflakes off her expensive suit and smoothed her golden blonde, chicly styled hair. "Come inside and let's have brunch. It's freezing out here. We'll have Eduardo make us a nice espresso." "I hate coffee, Mom. Have my whole life," I sighed. No matter what I said, they still weren't hearing me, and that was half the problem. "My heater works fine in the car, and I took a course in auto engine repair, remember? I'll be okay, and I plan to grab a hot chocolate at the D&D on my way out of town." I reached in and turned the engine on to warm up my Bug. She sputtered to life with a few groans and one loud backfire, which startled a few pedestrians and earned me several frowns. Story of my life. No one around here understood me, and I sure as heck didn't fit in. Getting my hair cut at cosmetology schools instead of expensive salons and shopping for my clothes in thrift stores apparently wasn't cool enough for these people. At 29, it was long past time I moved on and started living my life, not the one my parents had chosen for me. "I wasn't kidding when I said I will cut you off if you go," my father stated with no emotion. "I don't need your money. I have my trust fund," I retorted, lifting my chin and meeting his eyes square on. "Which won't last forever, dear," Mom added, her smile pleasant enough, but her eyes calculating as her brain undoubtedly searched for a way to stop me. "That's why I'm going to open my own business," I pointed out in a serious, firm voice. My father's laughter boomed out of his broad chest, hanging in thick puffs of cold air between us. "You call that a business?" "I'll call you when I get there," I said through my clenched teeth, refusing to let him bait me. I looked them each in the eye one last time. "Goodbye, Mom and Dad. Take care of yourselves." I slid into my car and pulled away from the curb without a backward glance, feeling free for the first time ever. I'd prove them wrong if it was the last thing I ever did, and then we'd see who would have the last laugh. What could possibly happen to me that was worse than what I'd had to endure thus far? Divinity was a small town in upstate New York, far enough away from the city to give me peace of mind, yet still a part of the state I loved. The Four Seasons had always appealed to me, and I couldn't imagine living in an area that didn't have them all. Each season brought its own unique qualities, adding variety to the life we lived, and I'd learned to appreciate every little aspect, even ice and snow. My sputtering little bug chugged its way down Main Street, my tires sliding through the late afternoon slush as I pulled into Rosemary's Realty and cut the engine. I took a deep breath of clean air and felt exhilarated. This was it, the day I picked up the keys to my new house. I'd already closed months ago, but I had Rosemary hold the keys. Organization was not one of my strong suits. I grabbed the batch of homegrown tea leaves I'd made especially for Rosemary as a thank you and hurried into the realty office. 5 minutes later, I had keys in hand, ready to walk out the door and start my new life. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Rosemary asked, slipping her tiny spectacles off her nose and letting them hang around her neck from the delicate chain they were attached to. "What do you mean?" She shook her platinum blonde bee's nest of hair. "You seem like a sweet girl, and, well, I'd hate for anything bad to happen to you on account of that old place being haunted and all." I patted her hand. "Oh, don't you worry about me. I don't scare easily," I winked. "If you say so." She sniffed the can of tea leaves and closed her eyes for a moment as though in heaven. "Thank you, sweetie, and good luck to you." Her smile looked more like a grimace, and I could have sworn I heard her mumble, "You're gonna need it," as I walked out the door. A few minutes later, I drove back down Main Street, turned onto Shadow Lane, and pulled my bug into the driveway of an ancient Victorian house with a massive wraparound porch. When I'd first seen this old, beautiful, painted lady that held so much charm, I knew I had to have her. Lady Victoria. No one in town wanted to own a haunted house full of old antiques, so I got her for a steal, and Vicky became mine. From the moment I first stepped foot in the door, I felt at peace. Like she approved and had been waiting for me. Like she knew I would understand what it was like to be different, unwanted. Boy, did I ever. I smiled fondly as I stared up at my new home, in desperate need of a fresh coat, making a mental note to add painting the house to my spring project list. Along with trimming the overgrown trees and bushes surrounding the lot, they might be bare of needles and leaves now, loaded down mostly with ice and snow, but it was plain to see come spring they would bloom and suffocate the poor neglected house. "You've been alone and neglected for far too long, old girl," I said as I slid the key in the lock and opened the door. A gust of wind swirled around and rushed in after me as though Vicky were taking a deep breath. The door slammed closed behind me, and I jumped, then laughed. All the rumors must be playing tricks on me. I wandered through the parlor and looked over the formal living room with pleasure. No TV, which was perfect, and a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf filled with old treasures I couldn't wait to get my hands on. One of the benefits of buying this house was that it came fully furnished with Victorian pieces, all except for one room off to the side. I peeked in the door and stared in wonder. My sanctuary. The room was small but cozy and filled with great light. The room had been left empty, like a sign that I was meant to decorate and use this room for my readings. Not one to question signs from the cosmos, I made another mental note to spend all week giving my sanctuary a makeover. Shivering, I realized how cold it was in the house. The thermostat read 55 degrees. It was a wonder the pipes hadn't burst. I hurried to the kitchen and checked the phone, but nothing had been turned on yet, even though I'd made arrangements well in advance. I pulled a pad of paper and pen out of my tassel-fringed knapsack and made an actual note to follow up on that, but I refused to let anything get me down. I chalked it up to the wonderful pleasures of owning my first home and taking care of her myself. No staff in sight. In the meantime, I found a stack of wood that looked like it had been there for centuries. I'd had the house inspected, so I was pretty confident if I started a fire in the fireplace, I wouldn't burn the house down. The one activity I'd wanted to participate in as a child that my mother had actually agreed to was Girl Scouts, where I learned to build a fire with sticks. Wonder of all wonders, it paid off. I bit my bottom lip and pride swelled within me. A roaring fire came to life as evening settled over Vicky and me. Quickly getting to work, I made myself familiar with the house and all its nooks and crannies while there was still enough light. Locating several candles, I brought them to the living room and lit them, then called the gas and power company again from my cell phone. They assured me they would get right on it. In the meantime, I unpacked my single suitcase in the master bedroom, changed the sheets, and slid into warm flannel pajamas. Adding groceries to my list, I made a cup of cocoa from the stash I had brought with me and carried it to the living room to enjoy my first night of independence, freedom, and solitude. So, why couldn't I shake the feeling I wasn't alone? The next morning, I blinked my eyes open to a dark and gloomy day. Snow fell in heavy flakes outside my bedroom window, and the house was freezing again. The fire must have burned out overnight, and obviously the furnace still wasn't on. Burrowing deeper beneath my down blankets, a shiver raced up my spine with the same feeling I'd had the night before. Someone was watching me. Turning toward my bedroom door, I sucked in a breath and yanked the covers over my head with a little shriek. My heart pounded and my pulse raced. I slowed my breathing and forced myself to relax. There was no reason to be afraid. It wasn't like a monster was out there, I told myself, and slowly lowered the covers. "Hello?" I said in a careful voice, staring at the large cat who sat a mere foot away from my head. He studied me with the blackest eyes I'd ever seen, and his fur was nearly glowing, it was so white. He didn't hiss, didn't meow, didn't purr, didn't so much as blink. He simply stared as though he were making up his mind about me. I wasn't afraid, but I had to admit it was a bit unnerving. "Where on earth did you come from?" I mused aloud. When I'd toured the house over a month ago with Rosemary, he hadn't been here. There had been no evidence a pet or person or anyone had stepped foot in this place in a very long time. Rosemary had said she'd kept the house locked up tight until yesterday when she'd handed over the keys to me. I couldn't help wonder how he had gotten inside and who had been taking care of him all this time. He certainly didn't look hungry. He looked perfectly fit, perfectly groomed, and perfectly beautiful, in a creepy sort of way. I flipped back the covers and sat up, but the cat didn't even flinch. Add perfectly calm and in control to his list of eerie qualities. I shook my head in wonder. Okay, then there's only one thing to do. Call Rosemary and see who you belong to, because there's no way you could have survived all this time out here on your own. I hopped out of bed, tossed on my thick terry cloth robe, and padded in fuzzy slippers all the way downstairs. At the bottom, I stopped short. The cat sat on the hardwood floor, looking at me. "Wait a minute. You were just upstairs. How'd you beat me down here?" Again, with the quiet, piercing stare, at least this time his ear twitched. "Aha! I saw that." I pointed at him. "You really are alive and not some stuffed animal, or worse, a figment of my imagination. I'm on to you. You're not so tough there, Buster." He blinked like he was getting tired of our game and turned around to walk regally to the living room and take up residence on the sofa as though he owned the place. Guess that meant he'd decided I was harmless as well. I chewed my bottom lip, tapping my slipper on the cold wooden planks as I studied him. Something about this feline called to me, something that said he was different and all alone in this world, but I still couldn't fathom how that could be. It might actually be nice to have someone around to keep me company, I decided, only he wasn't mine. What if he really did belong to someone else? I shivered, feeling the morning chill, and went over to stoke a fire in the fireplace. Glancing at the cat, I did a double-take. I could have sworn he arched a brow at me. "Oh, please, a little confidence here," I said, and once the fire was roaring to my satisfaction, I gave the cat a satisfied smirk. He turned his head in the other direction, the little stinker. I went into the kitchen, picked up the phone, and was greeted with a dial tone. Yes, it was working. I called the real estate agent's office, and Rosemary answered on the first ring. "Oh, Rosemary, thank God." "What's the matter, sweetie? I knew it was a bad idea to let you buy that old place." "I'm fine, Rosemary. There's just something I need to ask you." I peeked around the corner at the cat, and he pierced me with an accusing look. I shrugged as though I had no choice, and then ducked back behind the wall where he couldn't see me. "Fire away," she said. "Well, I seem to have inherited a cat along with the house." I turned around and jumped out of my skin, letting out a yelp. He sat on the kitchen floor at my feet, his black eyes narrowed. "A cat? What cat? And why did you yell? Do you need me to call animal control?" "No." I took a deep breath, my hand on my chest, then said, calmer, "No, I'm fine. Really, I thought I saw a mouse." A lie. And there went the cat's eyebrow again. I frowned as I continued. "I'm wondering if the cat belongs to anyone in town. He's bright white with jet black eyes and really big. Not overweight big, but really built for a cat, I guess you could say. Very svelte and sleek, quite lovely in a spooky, eerie, masculine sort of way." The cat puffed out his furry chest and started licking his paw. He looked as though he could understand what I said and was pleased. He had quite the personality, I was finding out, and I couldn't help being amused. "Honey, I've lived here all my life. No one in town owns a cat like that. Must be a stray, though I can't for the life of me figure out how he got inside that old house. Still, I'd hate to take him away from some poor soul who might be missing him," I responded. "He's quite a character." The cat shot me a look I could have sworn was a scathing response to my sarcasm. Rosemary sighed as though in defeat. "I'll put some flyers around town for you if you want. If no one claims him in a week, I say keep him. You could use an ally in that death trap." I giggled. It's not like he's a watchdog. The cat stopped cleaning himself, gave me a disgusted look, and pranced out of the kitchen with his head held high. "Either way, he's better than nothing. You never know if all them ghost stories are true." "I'll keep that in mind. Thanks, Rosemary." I hung up and added cat food, toys, a scratching post, bed, and litter box to my shopping list, secretly praying no one would claim him. Like it or not, we'd somehow bonded, and I didn't plan to give him up without a fight. Later that day, I left the cat on the couch by a well-stoked fire with a small bowl of water, and then I headed into town. I tried to ignore the signs posted about the mysterious cat found out at the old Victorian house on Shadow Lane. Rosemary hadn't wasted a moment in respecting my wishes, even though I secretly prayed no one would claim the cat. He felt like a sibling, something I'd never had. For some reason, I already felt closer to him than I did my parents. Sad, but true. I continued on down the street and bought a week's worth of groceries and plenty of cat supplies, meeting a few residents along the way. The last stop I made was at the hardware store. I bought supplies for my sanctuary's makeover and ordered a sign to be hung above my front door, then headed home. Home, I whispered, smiling. I like the sound of that. After spending all week redecorating my sanctuary and waiting for the phone to ring from someone claiming the cat, Rosemary called and said she'd taken the signs down. The cat was mine. I stared at the feline, knowing in my gut I was more his than he was mine, and decided I couldn't keep going around calling him Cat. But what on earth was I going to name him? I paced my living room as he sat watching me from his usual perch on the sofa. Glancing into the kitchen, it dawned on me that in the entire week of knowing him and trying to care for him, he'd pretty much continued to care for himself. He hadn't touched his food or water, hadn't played with his toys, and hadn't slept in his bed. No one in town had ever heard about or seen him, yet he'd been in the house alone for months before I'd moved in. It was almost like he was immortal. I stopped pacing and stared at him. That was it. I grinned. The perfect name. "I'm going to call you Morty," I said. Morty looked at me for a full, intense moment, and then he meowed for the first time since I'd met him. I swear if I didn't know better, the corners of his lips tipped up a smidgen. "Morty it is, then. It's you and me, pal, because from here on out, I guess we're in this together." I reached out to scratch behind his ears, and he let me. Chapter 2. "Tell me now, please, I have to know. You have to help me." A woman with long auburn hair half falling out of its updo barged through my front door at 5 p.m. Monday evening, a gust of wind and snow swirling in on a cloud of crystals behind her. She stood there, staring at me, all wild-eyed in her disheveled dove-gray suit, looking on the verge of a nervous breakdown. "What do you see?" "A psycho-crazy lady?" I wanted to say, but I could tell she was seriously upset. Something told me those words would push her right over the edge. I pasted on my most comforting smile and said, "It's okay. Calm down." I hurried to close the door, shutting out the frigid evening temperatures. January in upstate New York could be brutal, and this lady hadn't even worn a winter coat. It looked as though she'd simply walked out of her house in a panic, and in the dark, no less. "Why don't you come warm yourself by the fire and tell me how I can help you?" Your sign says Sunny's Sanctuary. Is that you? Are you Sunshine Meadows, the fortune-teller?" She stood rigid in the same spot, wringing her hands. If this was Crazy Lady's idea of calming down, I was a little alarmed to find out what the rest of my customers would be like. "Slow down for both our sakes. Don't make me pull out my Valium." I winked, only half kidding. Crazy Lady did not look amused. "All righty, then. Yes, I'm Sunshine Meadows, but everyone calls me Sunny." I'd only been here just over a week, yet people already knew my name and what I did for a living. I'd call that a success. "And you are?" I asked, gently taking her arm and carefully guiding her into the front parlor. "Oh, sorry. I've had a rather rough week." She held out her hand. "My name is Amanda Robbins, and I'm the town librarian." We shook hands, and then she sat down in a high-backed chair. She stared into the fire, reflecting on something that obviously troubled her, judging by the frown lines surrounding her mouth. I sat in the matching chair, giving her a moment to gaze into the crackling orange and yellow flames until she calmed down a bit. Morty wasn't the only thing keeping me here. Something about this mystical town called to me, as though the universe was telling me this is where I belonged. The people here needed me. I peeked at my troubled guest and knew in my gut the universe was right. "Yoo-hoo, Ms. Robbins, you in there?" She looked at me and blinked. "Ah, there you are. Good." I gave her a cheeky grin. "Now, why don't you tell me what has you so upset?" She took a deep breath. I can't tell you, but I'll pay you whatever you want. Please, you have to read my fortune and tell me what's going to happen to me." Her chest began to heave again, and there went those fidgety hands. So much for calm. "Okay. Keep in mind the more relaxed you are, the clearer my vision will be." She nodded once and took a shaky breath as I stood up. I was determined to put her at ease however I could. "Come with me." You do your readings in this house?" She looked around a little warily, as though just now realizing where we were. "Don't you find it, creepy?" "Of course I do my readings here. I live here." I took in the same walls that had freaked her out. I don't find this old house creepy at all. I find it comforting. The pipes groaned, the walls creaked, and I couldn't help but chuckle. "No worries," I said to Ms. Robbins. "The house has more bark than bite, I'm finding out." The librarian yelped, lifting her feet off the floor. "What was that?" "Don't mind him. That's Morty." I picked the pristine white cat up off the floor and deposited him on the couch. "He was here when I moved in, all alone with no collar. I guess he's decided to let me stay." I gave him a stroke and then sat back down. "I've never seen a cat so white with eyes so black before." She shivered as Morty kept his cold, dark stare focused on her. "I know, he's kind of intimidating, but he has a way of growing on you." She shivered. "I don't know about that." "He won't bother you." I shot Morty a look that said, "Be good." He twitched his lips, making no promises. Shaking my head with a half-smile, I met the librarian's eyes as I said, "Follow me. You'll be fine, I promise." She followed me without saying a word into the room I'd set aside specifically for my fortune-teller business. Parting the strands of crystal beads, we entered my sanctuary. "Oh, my, it's rather charming and unexpected." Ms. Robbins' lips parted slightly as she scanned the small, cozy room, her flowery perfume mixing with the scent of my aromatherapy oils. I'd painted the walls a soft, pale blue meant to relax the seeker while the seer, that would be me, read his or her fortune. New Age music poured quietly out of the speakers, a tropical fish tank bubbled away in one corner, a fireplace popped and crackled in the other, and various green plants and herbs were scattered about. Constellations covered the ceiling in a dazzling imitation of the universe, and when I dimmed the lights, they glowed, my favorite part. And, last but not least, my fortune-teller paraphernalia sat on shelves in the other corner. "Please, sit down," I said, pointing to the old-fashioned tea table in the center of the room. When she sat, I plopped down across from her and reached out. "Put your hands in mine." She swallowed loudly. Okay." "Good," I said in encouragement. "Now, close your eyes and breathe deep, letting your body relax from the top of your head down to your toes." When she did as I told her, I closed my own eyes and breathed slow and deep until I went into a meditative trance-like state. About 10 minutes into the process, I felt the librarian relax, and, just like that, I knew which psychic tool would work best on her. It always happened that way for me. "Tea leaves." I squeezed her hands and let go. "Excuse me?" Her eyelids fluttered open. "Certain psychic tools work better on certain people. You, my dear, are a tea leaf sort of girl." I nodded once with conviction, then got up and went over to my supply shelf. "Are you sure?" "I'm positive. Because I need you to be accurate. Trust me, I've always had a gift of seeing into the future. I've simply found certain tools enhance my visions. I've never been wrong before." I bypassed my crystal ball, tarot cards, pendulum, astrology, and palm reading charts, and finally found my special batch of homegrown tea leaves. My readings always come true. I admit I sometimes have trouble interpreting them. That's something I'm working on. But in the end, the true meaning eventually reveals itself. I returned to the table and set my supplies down. right next to the lovely ancient china tea set I'd found in Vicky's kitchen. "Ready to get started?" I asked. "More than you'll ever know," she exhaled heavily, and I couldn't help wonder what could possibly be so bad. "Fabulous!" I tried to inject some positive energy into her gloomy mood. "First, I need you to brew the tea." "All right." She glanced around.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?